Hello everyone, today I've started up another series, even though I haven't concluded many others, and I'll be going over the best looking episodes out of any series and analysing mainly the animation and predominantly the key fight of said episode. So in this one it will mainly be the battle between Genos and Saitama, but also other parts of what makes an episode like the music and sound effects for example. So shows like Hunter x Hunter, Rurouni Kenshin, Attack on Titan, and definitely Dragon Ball Z episode 64 in particular will come, but overall this is a perfect way to talk about other shows besides Dragon Ball all the time, and at the same time without having to make a lengthy review or comment on the entire series as a whole. But anyway, onto the featured artist for today, which is Chromosius Zeus. I hope I said that right. He has a lot of originality with a lot of really cool ideas and great execution. Link in description for his account, and if you want to be featured in a video aimed mainly at smaller accounts and for up and coming artists, tag me and use this hashtag. So let's dive into the animation analysis of episode 5 of One Punch Man. Now you may be thinking, why did I choose episode 5? Why not episode 12 or 1? And even those, to be honest, are definitely some of my favorite in the series, as well as the final episode of season 2. I already have seen a lot of breakdowns of those specific episodes, especially episode 1, and I always kind of like to go contrary and talk about the stuff that does get a bit less mentioned, and this one is quite a killer episode. So the first part of this episode involved him taking the physical test for the hero application. Nothing too noteworthy in regards to the visuals, that is. The scenes themselves were comedic, and there was some extra little anime only additions such as the whack-a-mole and the punching machine, which gave me flashbacks to the time Vegeta obliterated one as well. Although that little display Snek does was quite fluid and smooth, and when the bubblegum pops on Saitama's face, his whole head and chair actually rocks back from the pop, and you can notice how his head flicks back the furthest because this was the point of impact. The animator could have easily just had it pop and that's it, and although it is a small scene, I do appreciate that extra eye to detail. But anyway, when Snek approaches Saitama a little later on for some rookie crushing, we get provided with a gorgeous warm afternoon as our backdrop, a lot of pink and purple tones, which always I personally love seeing. There was also another small but good addition here with adding buildings in the background of this scene. As I said, it's nothing major, but like before, it adds depth. Definitely a lot of wallpaper worthy shots here. But a little further on, we get to Genos challenging Saitama. So we have Genos charging up with good build up as we see him prepare his afterburners. Perhaps they are called that, I don't know for sure. That's just what they reminded me of. But notice how you have this red vignette type filter slowly taking over the screen, drawing your focus into Genos and building the atmosphere. Then this small circle of blue light appears like the calm before the storm, and then suddenly there is all this intense camera shake and the flames themselves completely block out the camera, and some more gorgeous effects billowing out behind Genos as he shoots right at the viewer. And then there is this incredibly fluid slow-mo shot as he passes right over Saitama. But let's break the scene down further. So already we have some amazing smears here. The screen also blurs for about 3 frames. Also notice the insanely stretched proportions of Genos, but also how dynamic the pose feels. You have his right leg curved with his foot pointing in, his left leg is also crunched in, and his right arm is stretched way out. The pose doesn't feel stiff in any way, and you can just so clearly see the line of action here, adding flow. And credit definitely needs to be given to the storyboard artist. I believe there was actually 2 on this episode. But anyway, take a look at the composition and the lighting. The background is mostly blocked out in dark tones and shadows, and you have the center light again just honing your focus solely on these 2 characters throughout the whole sequence, further adding to the already great motion. Then thereafter we have some more wallpaper worthy shots, and Genos spins around with once again some quite insanely dynamic poses and great character acting. The camera pans behind Saitama and we have some speed lines used on both characters, and then there is this massive smear as Genos attempts to kick his opponent, as well as all the rocks flicking up from his attack. Also having him flick around in this continuous spin gives build up right before this kick. Again, everything slows down after the attempt to blow, allowing you to take in what has happened. Then we suddenly get this extreme long shot acting as sort of a bird's eye view over the battlefield, giving a great sense of scale to this battle. Thereafter, one of my favorite parts of all, with another exaggerated pose, and the proportions get even more stretched as he plummets towards the ground. Then a quick zoom in and Saitama is just covered in all these smears and dashes away, and there is also a massive smear trailing Genos. Thereafter striking the ground, there's all this camera shake and all these bolts of electricity that just slice through these rocks, and they somewhat envelop him completely as he gradually goes further into the ground, with dust and dirt completely engulfing him. And if that wasn't already visually spectacular, you have a really unique display of effects here. For one, there is this curtain of lightning bouncing around this somewhat atomic ring with additional rocks floating in a ring pattern as well. Then there is the final explosion with multiple waves of dust that eventually cover the entire screen. The words could barely do justice to how visually spectacular this was, and further illustrates how insanely hard of a kick that was. And once again, you get this brief pause in between the cut, like we have seen, in between all these major blows, giving you a moment just to take everything in and breathe. Then the whole color palette changes as Genos charges up an attack, and you get a seamless transition as all the dust covers the shot, and then when it begins to clear, you come straight back to Genos. It was also a cool little addition just to have him break the rocks behind him here as he plants his foot down, and once he increases the power, they then get shot out of there. It's all these small visual cues which give depth to these moments, even with like this ring of dust that surrounds him the entire time. Storyboard artist has continually composed shots so that you always have elements surrounding the character and your focus never leaves them once. Then finally, before this cuts end, we get a visual spectacle of all these flames with some quite unique shapes just plowing a hole in the cliff, and there is just a trail of burning embers left behind. But before things ramp up again, I have to give credit to Murata, which gave us in the manga some of those insane poses I love so much, like the initial kick at the start and the other one he does right before launching into the ground. So there was definitely a great base for the staff to build off from. But wait, there's more. So quickly after Genos begins to power up again to increase his speed, and we switch over to a shot on a low tilted angle looking up to Genos with a dark vignette filter, it seems, covering the edges of the camera in shadow, and there is a slow build up as he is just floating from the burning crater he has just made with lightning coming from his hands. The angle, the colors, the pose are so visually pleasing and really make this character feel like the powerful cyborg he is. Then in the next frame we get just a silhouette of Speedlines, and although quite hard to see in motion, he does do a lap around the crater. First, like, you have this small group of Speedlines on the other side as well as here, then again in the next frame, and you are just left with lightning and rock. And when in motion, you get an incredible sense of speed. You barely get a glimpse of the Speedlines, and the main thing you are just left with is all this rubble and camera shake. Anyway, Saitama becomes just one large smear and zips away, although I did find it interesting that after all the smears he then stops and returns back again and then disappears again. Anyway, you then see a shockwave in the corner of your screen. Once again, it sells the speed of the characters with the fact that he is already being engaged directly after disappearing off the scene. And we switch to this extreme long shot, then zooming in as they take flight, with the camera also gradually spinning around with some quite unique angles as Saitama continues to dodge all the attacks with ease, and we're just left with all these trails of smoke through the air, almost like an aerial dogfight. Then suddenly the camera shot is on its side looking directly at the ground, then spins around and we get a brief glimpse of the two with all these speed lines on the ground adding to the motion. Then you just see a crater and there is a trail of smears, and then they both disappear off screen for a brief glimpse, then reappear for a brief one frame, and this same action repeats the whole time while the camera is just moving forward through all the debris and smoke. And particular point of interest, I love how the smear frames are animated on twos. Now, from what I've seen when I've broken down scenes in the past, and even like before, they are generally animated on one, so every one frame is a completely different action, like you can see here, to accentuate speed. But by animating on twos, it slows everything down just that slight bit and allows you to capture all the smear effects in action, and it just looks gorgeous. And you also get a couple sparks in between as Genos is leaping up. It makes the characters feel incredibly fluid. Soon after, we just see craters and then a flurry of punches with a lot of thick, heavy speed lines, which what seems to be a chalk brush of some sorts, giving this gritty feel to some of the lines. Genos then attempts to track Saitama and lands with this grand entrance, with the camera positioned on the ground, looking directly behind him with quite a unique pose, and once again with great body language as well. It doesn't feel stiff in any way. And then we have a really detailed display of Genos's built-in power, which is dodged with ease, and soon after we get this great little bit of quite bouncy and fluid character acting as Saitama tries not to lose balance. You have some quite exaggerated poses here. But now getting to the finale, we have a panning shot of the battlefield with one portion still being animated with steam still rising out of this burning pit. Soon after, Genos has a shot at Saitama, launching a kick directly at the viewer with quite stretched out proportions. The music then builds up as he vanishes behind him, with the sound of drums becoming louder, with the overall tone becoming more darker as well. The camera is initially locked solely on Genos' expression, then slowly pans around to Saitama, who is covered in a lot of dark brownish tones, with these glaring white eyes and a small glimpse of red from his gloves, creating quite an ominous atmosphere. However, this is amplified even more as the symbol of death is planted boldly on the screen with drenched in red, then transitions to a gigantic fist launched directly at him, with a heap of thick speed lines surrounding it, with those white glaring eyes once again in the background. Genos is additionally scaled really small, making him feel tremendously vulnerable and weak in comparison. Furthermore, the color palette completely changes to a lot of red tones, further giving off the feel of impending doom. And at the last moment, Saitama stops and the camera just zooms out to an extreme long shot, again which helps sell how powerful these characters are when you see this enormous cloud of smoke with just the characters barely visible. Soon after, the black tones that were covering Saitama's face disappear and his bouncy, happy expression returns, and then we get a visual representation of how I felt after that fight. So that was an absolutely insane battle, exceptional storyboarding, countless well-framed shots, and I mean the camera movement was just out of this world. Great timing as well. Even though this was a very fast-paced battle, like I said before, you always would have a brief pause in between all the action, just allowing you to take it in. The storyboard additionally gave a great sense of scale, like this battle really felt like you had two superhuman opponents dishing out attacks on one another. Artwork was also on point. The key animators consistently provided fluid animation, and the music, although I only touched on it briefly, for the majority of the fight you had a kind of upbeat tempo with some female vocals laid over the top at times, almost sounding ethereal in a sense, especially when the vocals kick in as the camera pans over that massive hole in the cliff Genos has just made, like you're seeing his godlike powers in a sense, or at least that's how I felt. And then when combining all these components together, you have a fight that is just really immersive from start to finish. Although one point that I definitely will hammer home is the extremely bland and quite desaturated colors that stuck out more earlier in this episode, and I have touched on this issue in another video, but it is so evident here. And what is a little annoying is how easy of a fix it is. For example, I just chucked on a saturation filter and gave some of these screenshots a slight tint, and the characters really don't look like action figures and feel alive with blood pumping under their skin. These plastic tones are such a bizarre choice that unfortunately plagues a lot of shows. However, thankfully, it isn't too noticeable later on, and we get treated to quite a gorgeous array of colors in that afternoon portion of the episode. So anyway, with that final note, thank you for stopping on by, and if you haven't subscribed, well, there'll be definitely more content like this to come, so why not? And I think this is the first time I have done a video solely breaking down just one episode, and I am looking forward to doing more like this, perhaps some of Attack on Titan's wild episodes, especially Levi versus the Beast Titan. That would be a blast to go over that episode. But anyway, just a heads up, that content might be a little slower getting out than usual over the coming month or so, as I'm doing a one-shot for a silent manga competition, so that will occupy a solid portion of my time. So I might not do any time-consuming videos for a while, such as any new additions to the animated series in particular, but you know, we will see how things go. Anyway, with that, hope to catch you all in the next video.